Welcome to the Pitbull Patti Show. I'm your host, Patti Stuckler. We're keeping it real here with straight talk and sharing true stories that will inspire you to change your life. Are you ready for this? Because here we go. Do you often have anxiety or really just feel depressed? In the age of social media, it's becoming an increasing problem where people really feel disconnected, alone, and can have a lot of anxiety. So my guest today is the perfect person to discuss this topic and really help people understand it and kind of break it down for us. So she has been on Oprah Winfrey. She has been on all kinds of national radio and TV shows around the world. She has helped thousands of clients with really dealing with this issue. She has a doctorate in psychology, and she's the best-selling author of 9 books, including Healing Your Aloneness, Finding Love and Wholeness Through Your Inner Child. And her latest, newest book, I should say, is Diet for Divine Connection. So welcome, Dr. Margaret Paul.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this with you.
Me too. I think this topic, as far as anxiety, is just, you hear about it on the news all the time anymore, and it's just something that you hear about it with kids. And people comparing themselves through social media, through people that are doing all kinds of really cool things and looking so fab, and so it makes them feel bad. So how would you, if somebody came to you with depression, how do you treat them? How do you work them through that?
Okay, so there's 2 major causes of both anxiety and depression. One of them is, unfortunately, what's going on with our food system. Because with the industrialization of food, and especially things like the vegetable oils, which just destroy the brain and the gut. So what happens is that people eat this bad food with this sugar and fast food, and it goes into their gut, and it starts to create this huge imbalance in their gut, and that creates toxicity. And that toxicity goes right up their vagus nerve into their brain. And now the recent research in the last 10 years shows that toxicity creates anxiety and depression. So that's half of it. And that's why my new book, Diet for Divine Connection, says beyond junk foods and junk thoughts, because that's the other half of it. The other half of it is that most people they're so unaware of how they treat themselves. They do what I call self-abandonment, which is they've learned to completely avoid their feelings. So if they feel anxious, they'll graze in front of the refrigerator, or they'll grab a drink, or they'll turn on the TV. And what they don't realize is that all of our feelings have really vital, important information for us. Like anxiety may be telling you that, in fact, you're abandoning yourself. Like if your child came to you anxious and you want to be a good parent, you say, well, honey, what's going on? But if you ignore the child, you grab a drink, you graze the refrigerator, something like that, that child's going to feel rejected, and that's going to create anxiety and depression. So we're constantly rejecting ourselves, actually in 4 major ways, which I can go into. But it's these 2 issues. It's the food issue creating a problem, a physical problem that creates anxiety and depression. And it's the emotional issue of self-abandonment that creates it.
So that's really, really interesting as far as like this diet concept of you were talking about vegetable oils and things like that. A really good friend of mine, she's younger, and she has a lot of anxiety issues and will have panic attacks, and she's super healthy eater though. I mean, she eats a lot of fruits and vegetables. She's very thin and works out, does yoga. So you would think, so why would somebody like her, why would she, why would that affect her? Or what's going on with somebody like that seems to eat really healthy, exercises, does yoga, which I know would be something that would be really good for that. So what's going on with somebody like that?
Okay, well, first of all, I would have to ask her about her diet, because if she's not eating organic, she's getting all kinds of junk in her food. And if she's eating processed food, she's going to be getting the vegetable oils and the sugar. And so it's hidden in everything. But let's say she's eating an absolutely fantastic, ideal, fresh food, organic, really, really great. If she's abandoning herself, and this is what's going on with so many of my clients, and let me go into the 4 ways that people abandon themselves. Okay, so when we're kids, we all go through hard stuff, and we don't know how to handle it. And so one of the things we've all learned to do is go up in our head. We kind of disconnect from our body, and we go up in our head. Well, now we're still doing that. So many people, they operate just from their head, and they're completely unaware of what's going on their feeling level. Our feelings are in our body. They're not in our head. So if there's a feeling going on like anxiety, and a person just stays in their head, they're ignoring that. They're abandoning it. Or maybe they go and get meds, and I'm not against meds, but it covers it over. It doesn't really deal with the issue of self-abandonment. That's one way. The second way is, so many of us have learned to judge ourselves harshly. If we grew up with parents who judged us, you're not good enough, you're never going to make it, you're stupid, you're ugly, what's the matter with you? Then we have a voice in there that we absorbed from our upbringing. It may not have been parents, it may have been peers, it may have been teachers, it may have been media. That is kind of, it's not real conscious, but it's hammering away at us. Well, again, if you treated a child that way, that child would get anxious and depressed. Mm-hmm. The third way that we abandon ourselves is that when we get an uncomfortable feeling, instead of going inside and learning from it, like I said, all of our feelings have information, we turn to various addictions. We have an uncomfortable feeling, we go to the refrigerator, we grab a drink, we grab a cigarette, we turn on the television, we go to the internet, we go to social media. There's all kinds of things. We go out and buy things. All kinds of ways, all kinds of addictive ways that we ignore our feelings. And that, again, makes us internally feel very alone, very rejected. Mm-hmm. That creates anxiety and depression. The fourth way is that we tend to make other people responsible for our feelings. So whether it's parents or kids or friends or a partner, it's like, let's say you have a child, and instead of wanting to love that child, you keep trying to find somebody else to give that child away to. That child's going to feel rejected. Well, this is what happens with so many people. It's like they say, oh, this other person has to like me. This other person has to approve of me for me to be okay. I'm not going to do that for myself. Mm-hmm. Somebody else has to do it for me. And then we spend all this time trying to have control over how people feel about us, which is exhausting and doesn't work.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, that's so interesting. These 4, just taking some notes down. So kind of backtracking. The first one you mentioned was kind of made me think about like medication and things like that. I'm glad to hear you as a psychologist really say, hey, you need to, it sounds like you're saying, hey, you need to deal with it and not use an external thing. Now, I know people, including some family members, that have taken antidepressants for a while and things like that, and I've never understood that. I've really thought that's just something that I feel like you need to deal with, whatever it is, and to deal with it is how you can come through the other side. But if you're self-medicating or medicating through pharmaceuticals that are prescribed by a doctor, you're still not kind of really. It's like, isn't it kind of like a Band-Aid instead of really
it is
dealing with the heart of the matter, kind of?
That's exactly what it is. And the problem with medication, I don't know if you know this, but every mass murderer has been on these drugs, has been on psychotropic drugs. So what happens on the physical level is, let's say people are not eating well, and they're abandoning themselves. They're going to be anxious and depressed. Then they go to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist gives them these psychotropic drugs, which in some people have been proven to cause suicide and so we've got a big problem here in that it's not getting dealt with. People are not learning to manage their pain, nor are they learning to eat in a way that makes them feel happy and peaceful inside. And so then we hear all about these shootings and we hear about these suicides. And I'll tell you, my heart breaks, because people who learn to love themselves don't kill themselves, and they don't kill anybody else. And this is what I teach. I teach this process, amazing process called inner bonding. It's in both those books you mentioned, Healing Your Aloneness, although that's an older book, and then Diet for Divine Connection is a newer book. The process is in there. It's the most amazing process for learning to love yourself, step-by-step process that if people learn it, and anybody can learn it, it changes everything, and it changes it very rapidly. It's like, again, let's say you bring in a foster kid who's been abused, and you start to treat the child with love. That child starts to respond. Mm-hmm. Same thing on the inner level.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I've got a client that she was telling me that her mother was just absolutely horrible. Her mother, had a lot of issues, had her when she was very young, and was didn't even know herself, let alone be able to help raise a child. And she ended up with a couple of kids. But she really kind of did a lot of damage to my client, and really, kind of gave her the scripts of you're ugly, she just really did a number on this woman. And it's like, I think that sounds like that number 2 that you were talking about, where people, judge you or you judge yourself. Right. Is it like when you have parents that you kind of learn a script about right. who you are, what your role is in this world? I know my mom and dad, my dad always said you could do anything. My mom said that too, but there was always I always felt as a child like there was a little bit of, but don't get carried away. You know what I mean? Like you can do anything, but don't get crazy. There was always this limitation of some kind that I always felt like, and then as I got older, it's like I've, the beauty about getting older is I think a lot of people, including myself, start to free yourself from some of those limitations that perhaps either you set on yourself or maybe your parents or somebody else set for you, maybe a spouse, whatever. But you kind of then finally say, hey, I don't give a crap anymore. That's how I feel at this point in my life. It doesn't mean I don't care about what people think about me or that kind of thing. Of course I do. But it is different. I definitely feel free to do what I want to do, and I don't really care if somebody likes it or they don't like it or they approve of it or they don't approve of it. As long as I feel good about it, as long as I feel like I'm doing what I want to do and living my authentic self, I really don't care.
Yeah, but like you said, we've been programmed. There's a place at the lower part of the brain called the amygdala, and that's the fight or flight mechanism, and it's also where all these false beliefs are stored. That's the seat of the wounded ego. We call it the wounded self, and in our process of inner bonding. And so all these beliefs are in there, and it's like this little voice back there, your mother's voice, your father's voice, somebody else's voice that's just coming in there and telling you these things. And you might not realize that it's happening, but your feelings are letting you know. Because what I tell my clients is anytime you feel anything less than peace and fullness inside, there's likely some self-abandonment going on. And I had tons of anxiety before I started to do inner bonding, this 6-step process, because my mother was a rageaholic. She was narcissistic. My father tried to sexually abuse me in adolescence. So I had a lot of stuff to deal with when I was growing up. And I had that. My mother was always, that voice, that parental, harsh, critical voice was back there. You didn't do it right. You made a mistake. You better not fail. You're not good enough. You'll never make it. It was all back there. Mm-hmm. And until I started to pay attention to my anxiety and my depression, I didn't realize what was going on. But as I started to go in and pay attention and say to those feelings, whoa, what am I doing? What am I telling you? How am I treating you? And that voice said, you're always on me. You're pressuring me. You're critical all the time. You're pushing me, and I'm never good enough. I thought, wow, I didn't even know I was doing that. And that's what the anxiety was about. All this internal pressure. Because I started eating well a really long time ago. So that wasn't the issue for me. The issue was this self-abandonment. And as I became aware of it, as I started to really tune into the anxiety and connect it to that judgmental voice, the anxiety went away because I was able to stop judging myself. And anybody can if they start to become aware of it and connect their anxiety and depression to that critical voice that's going on in the background, that kind of monkey mind that's always at you.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting because I have thought to myself, right or wrong, but that when somebody is like depressed, like seasonal depression, and I know there's validity to that. I'm not suggesting there isn't, but I think to myself, wow, that sounds to me like kind of a fat man's disease almost. I know that sounds crude, but like the luxury. It's like you think about like the refugees that come here. You think about the people in that caravan that's coming to the United States. And I think to myself, well, like if you're just worrying about where you're going to sleep tonight and you're worrying about where your next meal, you're not thinking about seasonal depression, are you? You're not thinking about like, oh, I don't know myself. Right? You don't have the luxury of that. So it's kind of like that self-actualization with Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Right.
That it's like you get higher and higher to where you have all the creature comforts of the world, say in your life, in this country, wonderful country we live in. And it's like, isn't it some of that? Am I wrong to look at it that way?
Well, like some of my clients are very, very wealthy. They have everything. They have everything that they were told is going to make them happy and peaceful. They have the big house. They have the partner. They have the kids. They're retired because they don't have to work. They made all this money. They get to do whatever they want. And they're anxious and depressed. Mm-hmm. And even if they're eating well, and some of them are, they're anxious and depressed because they're ignoring their feelings. See, if you have a feeling of anxiety and you then ignore it, that inner child, which is our feeling self, will get more anxious. Like when your daughter was a child, if she came to you anxious and you ignored her, she'd get more anxious, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's what happens on the inner level. And that's what people do. They get anxious. Oh, they don't want to deal with their anxiety. They want it to go away. They want to get rid of it. Let's go do something. Let's daydream. Let's call somebody to come and fix us. Let's get on the internet.
Take a pill.
Take a pill. Rather than going inside and saying, what am I doing? How am I treating you? What am I telling you that's causing you to feel this way? Mm-hmm.
Is it kind of like running? Like, is it kind of like running in the sense like you've got a issue or you're having a anxiety attack or you're feeling very anxious and depressed or whatever, right. And then you don't want to deal with it, so you distract yourself with everything out there.
That's right, with all the addictions. And what I help my clients learn to do is move towards the feelings rather than away from them. Move towards them with compassion. People have to learn to move into compassion rather than judgment. And when they go inside with compassion, oh, wow, this inner child, this feeling part of me is feeling anxious and depressed. Boy, there must be a good reason. I wonder what I'm doing to cause this. And then one of the things that I do in this 6-step process is that I help people access a higher source of love and wisdom and guidance. And this is why that book is Diet for Divine Connection, because it takes these two things. It takes eating well, and it takes being open to learning. In the process I teach, there's only two choices, only two intentions in the inner bonding process. One is the intention to avoid pain with some form of addictive and controlling behavior. And the other is the intention to learn about what I'm doing, what's loving to me, what my beliefs are, and what I can do differently in terms of taking loving care of myself. And so I teach people to open into their heart and open to learning and invite this love and compassion that's here. We live in it. And we can invite that warm, kind, loving, wise energy into us to help us understand what's loving to us and to help us be compassionate towards our feelings and our past or our present or whatever we're doing, rather than judgmental. As soon as we judge ourselves, we're abandoning ourselves. But the minute we go inside with compassion, that alone starts to release the anxiety and the depression. Compassion, self-compassion is amazing.
So it sounds like people really need to set out on a course, get educated on how to do what you're talking about, your
Right.
inner bonding, and really stop running from it in all these different ways, whether it's
Right.
medication, self-medication, social media distraction, phone,
Right.
whatever it may be that people do to not deal with it. Sounds like people really need to stop and take the time to really self-reflect, be self-aware, learn to
Right.
love yourself, and do the hard work that's necessary. But I got to ask you, how do you deal with? I've seen somebody have a panic attack before, not that long ago, and I didn't know how to help this person. It's not something I've ever suffered from. I haven't had, thankfully, and maybe it's because I am now in my 50s. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I'm not a young person where I'm feeling all these different, all this anxiety. I didn't really know how to help the person. So what would you suggest? What should I have done? And
Okay, by the way, Patti, you look fantastic for 50.
Thanks. I try.
Okay, so panic, again, let's say that you're with a child in a store and the child wanders away and can't find you. The child's going to feel panicked, right? Oh my God, where's mom? I'm all alone. Okay, so panic attacks come again from these two sources. One is what's going on in the gut. There's an imbalance in the gut. When people keep having panic attacks, it means that there's toxicity going on there. They really have to attend to their diet because that toxicity is going up into the brain and causing panic attacks. The other is the self-abandonment, that they're not attending to themselves. And that inner child part of them ends up feeling all alone. Oh my God, I'm just a kid and there's nobody here taking care of me. This person who's supposed to be an adult isn't here, completely ignoring me. That can cause panic. And so if I was with somebody who was panicked, first I bring in a lot of compassion for them. I help them to breathe and bring that compassion in for themselves, reconnect to themselves. They want to move away from the panic. They have to move towards the panic. And so they have to bring compassion in and breathe into the panic. And that right away is going to start to de-escalate it. The sort of natural intuitive thing is, I got to get this to stop. I got to get away from it. But that's not what's going to help it.
Wow, kind of like go towards the fire.
That's right. Towards the feeling. Show up like you would with a child. Honey, I'm here. You're not alone. If we just tell that to ourselves, I'm here. I'm grown up. I can take care of things. You're not alone. And then to start to tune in. What am I telling myself that's making me feel panicked? I'm telling myself something, I can't handle this, or I'm going to die, or whatever we're telling ourselves that's making us feel panicked.
Wow. Do you have recommendations or advice as far as social media and how much time people spend on that kind of thing?
Well, I tell you, if people were really attending to themselves, really learning to love themselves, they actually would not want to spend much time on there because it's quite disconnecting. When we're connecting to ourselves, when we're learning to truly love ourselves, we really enjoy sharing love with others. It's not like, oh, I'm going to love myself and I'll be isolated. It's like, oh, wow, I'm all filled up with peace and joy and love, and I want to find somebody to share that with. And social media is not the way to do that. Mm-hmm. This has to happen in person. So social media has very little draw for me. I just go on like I have to, but mm-hmm. that's it. But it becomes addictive for people who are abandoning themselves. And so what I say to people who are operating out of an addiction is, don't try to just get rid of the addiction. Start loving yourself. Start learning. Start practicing the 6 steps of inner bonding, and really learn to love yourself and connect to your higher self and bring that love in. Take care of yourself. And then you're going to find those addictions just fall away. I used to be so addicted to food. I mean, just it was an obsession. And if I had been able to throw up, I would have been bulimic, but I don't have a gag reflex, so I couldn't. But it was a huge addiction. Plus, I was addicted to anger, all kinds of other things. As I learned to practice this, they just fell away. I don't have them anymore.
Well,
that's what happens.
No, I think that is really, especially these days, there's a lot of addiction problems everywhere, opioids and so forth. It sounds like somebody could really benefit from learning from your books and the inner bonding, and really kind of a lot of self-discovery. To heal.
And a real process. The new book, Diet for Divine Connection, has all of this in it. The whole inner bonding process, plus how to go about learning what foods are right for you. I don't recommend a particular diet other than clean, organic. People have different philosophies about how they want to eat. But I do recommend a way of tuning into what's right for your particular body, because people's bodies are different. They're going to respond differently to food. And I teach a process in the book of being able to know what's right for you. Again, the more we tune into ourselves, the more we're going to know what's right for us. The less we're going to need to turn to outside authorities for what's right for us. People are always going to authorities like, well, what do you think? What should I do? Mm-hmm. Once you learn this, you go to the authority, your own higher self. Wow. And that authority knows what's right for you.
The big guy.
Yeah.
Well, I love that. I think that's great. I think it's a very interesting, unusual kind of concept, really, as far as sounds like you're merging diet and organic eating and not the processed stuff, in addition to the really doing the hard work of self discovery and self work.
Right.
So kind of that sounds really like a new way to kind of a new approach to combine those two. And I think that's so helpful. I think your work is really fascinating. I can't wait to read your book, the latest, the Diet for Divine Connection. And hopefully people will check it out. How can people find you and really kind of buy your books? And I think you do classes and seminars.
Right? I do. So if they go to innerbonding.com, it's all on there. I do 30-day at-home courses. I have one starting next Wednesday for loving yourself, and it's a fabulous course. And then I have other courses. I do workshops on the coast and in the southeast, and at Crapullo and at 1440, all these different centers. I do 5-day intensives, which are very in-depth if people really want to do a deep level of healing. All the books are on there. They're also on Amazon. So it's easy for people to get them.
Yeah, and I was reading, I know you sold over 1 million copies of one of your books. Yeah, which is just an astounding feat right there. If people don't realize how rare that is. A lot of you're lucky authors oftentimes to sell 10,000 books or 20,000 books So to sell over 1 million copies of any book is quite an accomplishment, and congratulations to you and all the work you've been doing for so many years. And I know you've helped celebrities along the way.
Right.
So I think that is super cool. And
and one other thing that I want to stress is that, you're doing a great job of taking care of yourself as you grow older. I just turned 79, and
Wow.
I am so full of energy, so full of health. And I think I'm a really good role model for people taking care of themselves on both the physical, emotional, and spiritual levels.
Well,
Because we don't have to get sick. We don't have to lose our energy. We don't have to lose our brain power if to love ourselves.
well, you look fantastic. 79. And in fact, so are you going to have a big, huge party when you turn 80? What are you going to do when you turn 80?
I don't know. We'll see.
Well, my stepmom, when she turned 80, she did not want a party. And so she, what did she do? I'm trying to think. She does amazing stuff. She goes and whitewater rafting in
Right.
Colorado, like for 7
Right.
days, where you literally camp out in tents and sleep on the ground. And I mean, she's just, at 80 years old, she's quite amazing. So
That's great. I love to hear that because, so many people my age, they're decrepit, they're having their knees replaced, their hips replaced, they're in pain all the time. Doesn't have to be that way. But you got to be willing to learn to love yourself physically and emotionally, especially. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I think this is such a great topic, and I hope there are a lot of people that will listen to your advice and read your books and really get some help and do, kind of get off the mouse wheel, so to speak, of distractions of all kinds, whether it's email all day long or phone calls or the social media nonstop, and comparing themselves to other people and really just dig deep inside and really do their own work and really learn to, love themselves. I think that's so important.
That's
I
right.
hope people learn a lot from you. So thank you so much, Dr. Margaret. And I don't know. I hope people check it out.
Great. I do too. Thank you so much.
Well, this wraps up this episode of the Pitbull Patti Show. So until next time, thanks again.